Episode 13 Ghost in the Machine. Greetings and welcome, Dark Wanderers and stubborn disbelievers alike. You've once more appeared in my dark and sordid little corner of the world. My name is Jessi, and I'm here to share the dark and twisted, the spooky and scary encounters everyday people stumble into. So sit back, put your feet up, and listen. This is the saga I was to read last week, before Miss Burton's rather untimely interruption. I wonder if she's doing okay. I did text her, dear listeners, but she has not replied. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad omen. Yet another transcript, one that brings us a step or two closer to finding out who this Anton Scrivener really is. A photocopy I believe I made a few years ago at the Toronto Reference Library, though my organization, now that I'm looking at it, is lacking in, every way, really. Could have been one I found in Winnipeg or during my trip to the States even. One day I'll organize this all. Anyways, I've told you before, investigator, that I'm not interested in speaking to you. I know who you are. You're not here to help. You're just going to file away my statement, my story, and leave me in the dust. I'm going to find Scrivener and put an end to it. What do you mean? Yeah, okay. You're probably right. Fine. I'll tell you, though I'm sure by now you already know it. Whatever power or creature you serve, I'm sure they want it directly from the source, yeah? Fine. I'm Ezra Cerullo. Remember Y2K a couple years ago? Yeah. Everyone afraid that the computers couldn't continue into the new millennium, convinced we were heading back to the industrial age with steam engines and coal. Yeah, even computer techs were telling us that. Most of us weren't ready to go all, what's the term nowadays, doomsday prepper? Yeah, most of us were not quite at that point, though many of us found ourselves somehow convinced that just getting new computers could solve the problem. So we got rid of our old ones and got new Y2K-proof computers. Obviously now we know better, but at the time, it all made sense. Computers had been programmed for the last millennium. They wouldn't be able to make the shift to the new one, leaving us all with dilapidated junk that used to work like magic. So many people ripped us off. There were some peeps who were smart. They coded disks that would make a little box appear saying, finding and removing Y2K bug with a little loading bar or sometimes a countdown. Some people, they made a small fortune off of that. Not least of all that fucking scumbag Anton Scrivener. He told me and some friends of mine that he was a computer salesman. He knew of the Y2K bug, of course, and had made sure to get his hands on a small selection of Y2K-proof computers. We had a small amount of computer knowledge between us, so we asked how. How was it Y2K-proof? He told us the solution was simple. Y2K was like a foreign invader in our bodies, like an infection. So all he had to do was get antibodies, or in this case, program a virus that was designed to attack the bug that prevented the computer from understanding the new millennium. I don't remember the exact terms he used, but he was incredibly convincing. I remember that when he spoke, he never directly answered what we asked, but his answer was always so well put that we were satisfied anyways. Whatever image comes to mind when you say con man, that's him. Bet he could sell ice to an Eskimo. We asked why he had picked us to sell to. He told us he was simply a traveling salesman looking to offload his product on whoever he thought needed it. We all got a little concerned at that, but his confidence, that suave nature of his, the nice suit, it all seemed above board. He even brought his own laptop, a big heavy thing weighing at least 10 pounds. He showed us the program. It was like something out of science fiction, the kind of stuff you'd see in theaters or written by Asimov. The screen lit up in a sickly green almost, and with a whirring that kind of set my teeth on edge. The others, though, they were enraptured. They stared, their eyes held fast to the flickering screen. There was a person there. More like a silhouette made of a strange bluish light. It contrasted oddly with the weird screen colors. It moved slowly, jerkily on the screen. Honestly, I don't know what it was supposed to show us, but we all suddenly wanted it, myself included. I remember Anton never looked at the screen, having turned it on, then turned it to us. He just watched us, and I felt like he was watching me in particular. He said he had come into a small selection of these laptops, just as powerful as any home PC. More so, he said, and of course, Y2K proof. The way he said it all, it made my blood run cold, and I don't really know why. I thought I was just drunk. We were in a bar after all, and we'd been drinking all night. That's why things were seeming just a little too weird, right? Most of my buddies had pulled their wallets out asking for a price. I didn't, not yet, though my mind still was distracted by that moving figure. It seemed like it was trying to reach out to me. At one point, I think it fell to its knees. The group laughed when that happened, but it looked to me like it was begging or praying, maybe. I blinked and shook my head a little, unsure of just what it was I was seeing. I mean, I knew it was all weird, all definitely not above board, but I didn't leap to supernatural. No, I just thought he'd got the laptops off the back of a truck, if you know what I mean. Anton named a figure. I don't even remember what the number was anymore. Most of us pulled out checks, myself included this time. Even with all my weird feelings and suspicions, he seemed trustworthy. Seemed like he really just wanted us to be able to use computers in the new age. He asked us to make them out to cash. His bank was American and couldn't accept Canadian checks. None of us batted an eye, though now I can see that as the BS it was. We signed away most of our savings, those of us who couldn't afford it, asking him to hold on to one for them until they could. He just nodded patiently, but never said yes or no. He said he'd bring them by the next day. Some of us were a little suspicious at that, but we were drunk and not in our right minds, so we just agreed. The next morning, I think most of us were certain we'd been swindled, scammed out of our life savings, but when we called the banks, the money hadn't been cashed yet, so we held on to hope. That night, we went to the bar, and there he was, sitting with about a dozen or so of those heavy portable PCs. I look back now and wonder just how he carried those. If he came by cab, I'm sure the fare would have been huge, as they'd have to sit and idle while he carried one or two at a time. They weren't small enough to stack. And he never had a partner, and none of us ever saw him with a car, so he must have been by cab. It's a weird detail to stick out, I know, but it stays in my mind, you know? Like with all the other weirdness, it's that small moment that I remember most. Anyways, he greeted each of us by name like we were old friends. I remember thinking it was odd. I wasn't sure we'd even told him our names, but I discussed it because our names were on the checks, right? Though how he remembered which check went with which face. Anyways, we sat at that booth, some of us having to stand since there was no real room. We got some drinks and Anton handed out our prizes, encouraging us to ensure that they worked to our satisfaction. And they did. I remember I was the last one to get one, and he'd very deliberately looked me in the eyes as he handed it to me, a small smirk on that confident face. I remember thinking that for sure he was indeed swindling me, that he was handing me the world's most expensive paperweight. But we all turned them on and they worked. They lit up, the screen loaded, the Windows logo appeared, and then that silhouette appeared. It was see-through, so we could still see the screen past it and open the different programs, just that twitching light over it. Again, everyone but me seemed entranced by it. I remember looking up and seeing Anton looking at me, specifically, just staring, his almost glowy blue eyes burning a hole into me. He didn't look away when I looked up, and I found myself trying to avoid his gaze. Even now, I'm not sure why. We all expressed our satisfaction and thanks, even bought him a few drinks. I was a little weirded out, so I took to drinking a bit more than I normally did. Everything was weird with this whole situation, but it seemed to be working out in my favor, so I got drunker than I normally do and headed home, my new prize clutched to my chest. I live alone, so when I got home, I plopped the heavy metal box on the table and went straight to bed. My dreams that night were filled with that dancing silhouette, that kneeling prayer. I woke up the next day, weirdly refreshed despite the strange dreams. I went to work as normal and came home to enjoy some TV. The computer sat there for a few days until I remembered it. It wasn't really that I'd forgotten, more like I just hadn't had a need to use it yet. But my boss at the time had wanted me to write up a report, and I was much faster at typing than I was at printing, so I decided I'd type it up, print at work, turned it on, and there it was. That blue light figure, most definitely on their knees, their hands clasped together, clearly raised in a begging prayer. There was no sound, but I'm sure they were begging, pleading. I poked the screen and the thing there jumped, flinching as if I'd punched it. I said hello? I felt stupid talking to a computer screen, but this was so weird and I was alone, so why not? It stopped moving and looked to me. It was a silhouette, no face, but I'm sure it was looking right at my eyes. Can you hear me? I asked, and it slowly nodded. I got a little freaked out at that and pushed the box away, walking away. I wasn't scared, not really, but the entire thing was starting to get really weird for me. I took a slightly shaky breath and headed out to get some coffee. Maybe I was drunk. I hadn't been at the bar, so no, that wasn't it. I hadn't had my usual beer either. My hands were shaking when I sat down at the box again a couple hours later, the coffee almost spilling onto it. The figure looked at me again, but it was different this time. Less blue, or more blue. It's hard to explain, but it was less translucent, less see-through. Like it was harder to see the stuff behind it. I sat there for most of the night talking to the figure. Sometimes it would answer, nodding or shaking its head, but it never spoke. I don't think it could. I went to bed without turning off the laptop, my mind racing. I woke up and called into work, unsure of what was going on, but not sure I should leave it unattended. My supervisor angrily asked what the hell was going on. I asked what she meant. She said most of the shift had called in. She listed some of the names, and every one of them had bought one of these computers. I told her I didn't know, I was just not feeling well. She apologized and said she was frustrated. All the ones who'd called in refused to say why. I told her it was alright. I'd call some of them, see what I could do, see what I could find out. She thanked me and hung up. I did call, but they just told me they were busy and hung up before I could ask what they were busy with. I went back to that computer and it was still on. Well, I hadn't plugged it in, and it wasn't until then that I realized I hadn't been given a plug. There was nothing to power and charge the box, and yet it was still sitting there, still on with that sickly green glow. I decided to go back to that bar. I wasn't really sure why, but all this had started there, so it made sense to me to go back. Anton was there, sitting in that same booth, sitting with his hands folded on the table, looking to be bored, waiting for me. I sat across from him, and he smiled a knowing grin. There was something old about that smile, like it belonged to someone much older than the young 30-something in front of me. He asked if he could buy me a drink. I said yes, unsure of what to say to him. Should I confront him, ask him what he knew? Should I play it more coy? Before I could say anything, he talked first. Asked how the laptop was. Was it working to my satisfaction? I told him that no, it wasn't. That there was something in it that was making it impossible to work. He raised an eyebrow, asked me to elaborate. I knew he knew something then. I don't know how, I just did. There was something in his voice or the way his eyebrows moved, something. I just knew that he knew what was happening. I told him that silhouette was alive, or seemed so. He just nodded as I whispered, certain that I sounded like a lunatic. He told me it was. It was alive, that only something alive could find and fight the bug. Only something alive could provide the power needed to run it. I was a little shocked, to be honest. I had expected him to deny or say I was crazy, or I'm not sure what exactly, but I didn't expect him to agree. He said it was okay, that the thing in the computer just made it run better. It would never need to be charged, and as long as I left the thing alone, I could do whatever I wanted on it. He said I'd be amazed at the possibilities. I asked what would happen if I didn't leave the thing alone. He said that I didn't want to know. I knew then that something was happening to my colleagues. I asked him who he was or what he was. Was he some kind of demon? He just laughed. Asked me if I really wanted to know. I paused, unsure of what to say. I finally nodded, and he told me. He told me all about this world people like you and him dance through, the powers you deal with, the monsters that run rampant. He told me what was happening to my friends and that I couldn't stop it. They chose this, he said. He told us to ignore it, and we hadn't. I went to argue with him, but I did remember that when he first showed us on his. He'd said to leave it to its work. When I asked just what it was, he told me I already knew. And he was right. Of course he was. Of course I knew. I asked if we could free them or help my friends. He said we couldn't. I got angry at that, but he just smiled. That damn cocky smile. That one that says, I know everything and you know nothing. I hate that damn thing. I went home a little drunk and only half believing what he told me. So much of it just seemed too fantastical to be real. I mean, the computer thing, it was freaky, but it wasn't the same, not compared to the monsters, the artifacts he talked about, no. I decided I was a drunk and he was just a sleazeball who'd taken advantage of some run-of-the-mill workers. Until I got home and saw that computer. The notepad was open and it was typing. Help me, Ezra, over and over and over and over. That sobered me fast. I asked how could I help? Who was it? The text paused and started again. It said, please help, over and over. I asked again how to help. It sent a bunch of question marks. I was starting to get panicked at this point. I slammed the thing closed and drove with it to my buddy's place. He'd been the first one to whip out his wallet. I knocked on the door, but it just swung open. Now that spooked me a bit, and I stepped in, holding the possessed laptop in front of me like a shield. I don't know why. It was heavy and big, and soon my arms burned as I took each step. I walked slowly, worried that any noise would... I didn't know. Just that I shouldn't announce myself. I eventually found my buddy and let out a yelp. He was at his kitchen table, bent over with the laptop. When I say bent over, that was just my first impression. As I got closer, slowly lowering my heavy metal machine, I realized he wasn't bent over it. Rather, he was standing bent over because his head was in the computer. I dropped mine as I ran over to him, yanking on his shoulders, pulling him out before we both collapsed on the floor. He looked at me, or at least I think he did. His face turned to me, his eyes on me. But they were empty. They were still present, still brown, but there was no life in them. Like his soul was no longer a part of his body. I called his name, I shook him, but his body just moved limply in my hands. His heart still beat and he still breathed, but there was no consciousness, nothing. It was just a shell. The sound of whirring caught my ears, and I realized that his computer was still on. I got up and looked at it, afraid of what I'd see. There were two silhouettes in that screen. They stood next to each other, looked to be talking as their hands gestured to and fro. Then one leapt at the other, tackling it, began to punch, to hit. I jabbed at the screen, trying to get whoever was on, whoever off, but it wasn't like the one in my laptop. It didn't react at all. Just kept hitting the silhouette over and over, little splashes of light blue starting to hit the screen, slowly dripping down. I tried to smash the computer to break the screen, but nothing worked. I grabbed something off his counter, some heavy kitchen tool, and brought it down over the screen, over and over and over. Not a scratch. I realized it wouldn't be destroyed by me, probably not at all. So I picked it up as well as mine and left the house. I called the police anonymously, claiming to be a neighbor who saw someone go in. He was taken to the hospital in a coma, and he's been like that ever since. They all have. I went around to all their houses and collected all their computers, taking care to close each one. I brought them all home one by one. I still have them. I don't know if any of my friends' souls are in there still, or if they've all been killed by whatever thing lives in their computer. All I know is they're all still in comas, all staring vacantly at the ceiling. Sometimes their fingers move as if they were typing. I never saw Anton Scrivener again. Been looking for him ever since. I don't know that he's responsible, but he's the one who sold us the machines, ghosts and all. I'll find him. One last part of this file, dear listeners, there was a newspaper clipping attached that I also photocopied. Covered an epidemic in Winnipeg. Side note, I'm guessing I got this file while in Winnipeg, where a bunch of workers, 13 to be exact, that suddenly fell into comas, all of them working for Star Warehousing, which according to the article shut down shortly after this. There is a part of me that thinks this Anton Scrivener is necessary in a way. In a lot of myths and in definitely a lot of fairy tales, there's a character who comes in and is often indirectly responsible for what happens to the main characters. The Enchantress in Beauty and the Beast, the demon in the tragical histories of the life and death of Dr. Faustus. They're often seen as the merchant. Not always literally, as seems to be the case for this Anton Scrivener, but they usually offer some sort of deal, something that the main character finds irresistible only for it to backfire on them, usually in some sort of spectacular or ironic twist. This Anton Scrivener seems to be a rather literal interpretation of this, a merchant who offers things people want, a long-lost relic, a way to beat an unbeatable computer bug. I wonder if he makes these items, or simply knows where to find them. I can't help but also wonder with the last name Scrivener, if Audio Agrotatio was once his book. How much carnage is this one man responsible for? Tell me, dear listeners, did this saga sway you? Have you joined the legions of Dark Wanderers, or are you as unconvinced as ever? And as ever, let's cross that veil together.